So, hello everybody, and welcome to this Goodwill Meditation Group webinar. My name's Steve Nation, and I'm part of the Goodwill Group here in New York. And later on, after the meditation, which we're doing, we'll be joined by Dr. May East, and May will be joining us from Edinburgh in Scotland. So today we're meeting just 2 days after the conclusion of the Summit of the Future at UN headquarters in New York, and 4 days after what's widely celebrated as the International Day of Peace. And we're meeting during the high-level debate and other events at the UN that surround the opening of a new session of the General Assembly. This week in September is always the main week in the whole of the UN calendar. Today, global leaders and experts and stakeholders are gathered for a high-level meeting of the General Assembly on sea level rise. Major UN conferences like what's happening during this week at the UN are often thought of as government-only affairs. But they've become so much more than this. For local groups linked into international networks are now a vital and strong and energetic part of huge global events like the summit. For example, nearly 100 mayors from major world cities, including London, New York, Tokyo, Beijing, and Lagos, have pledged to take actions in their cities in response to the climate crisis, which is a global crisis, as part of a C40 network of mayors. And this C40 network have been participating in a range of events at and around the UN during this week. And that's just a symbol of the multitude of local communities and local interest groups that are reflected in global events. All this means that there's a massive concentration of energy, imagination, planning, and focused thought, alongside all the outer stimulus of political negotiation, media attention, and we shouldn't forget a good load of glamour. There's plenty of will to good and goodwill in evidence amongst thinkers and actors within and outside government, who are inspired by their recognition of the need to build an outer world that better reflects the oneness of life. And we can imagine the overshadowing and empowerment of the new group of world servers that occurs as relationships and alliances and inspirations are shared amongst servers and members of hierarchical seed groups who are part of the numerous gatherings and conferences. We should also recognize that in addition to the deep servers gathered, there are those who simply want to maintain the status quo and not rock the boat at events like this, saying the right words and exercising their imagination and diplomatic skills without any intention of actually moving things forward in the direction of right relations. That's always a factor. And then, of course, we shouldn't forget that there are also a smaller number of, but there are networks and organized groups within governments and powerful corporations and civil society movements who participate in events surrounding this summit and other events like this with a common focused will to actually empower separateness, materialism, and national self-centeredness. So it's within and as a conscious part of this mix of energies, ideas, ideals, creative planning, and shades of will that make up the environment of thought of the summit and the high-level week at the UN that we now take our stand. During the summit that ended on Monday, many of us will have worked with Goodwill's cycle of conferences visualization, imaginatively projecting a seed of lighted will energy into the heart of the thought form under construction on sustainable development and on the transformation of the UN system, reflecting on the idea that human planning today is one of the first indications of the emergence of the will aspect. And it's the guarantee of the capacity to respond eventually and in group formation to God's plan. Today, the focus is a little different as we work with the Goodwill meditation, visualizing the channel that exists between the spiritual hierarchy and humanity, and imagining the energy of goodwill flowing through this channel into the wide world of human relationships. Yet still we can recognize that during moments like this week of events at the UN, there is an attempt to focus and concentrate attention, care, enthusiasm, and dialogue between different ideologies, to focus all of this into plans for making a better, more just and equitable world. And within all the shades of intention and purpose that make up the inner environment of the event, we can affirm that there is, within humanity, even within our local communities, that there is a core of focused goodwill which, at its heart, is inspired by a higher will resonant with God's plan and purpose. When we think about the energetic and the psychological environment of this moment in human affairs, we should also note that the Virgo full moon was only a week ago, and that many of you on this call will have shared in reflecting on the new consciousness of oneness and synthesis that is coming to birth in the mind and heart of the human, impacting all manner of relationships in dramatic and profound ways. A new humanity is in process of being born, and much of the trauma and intense disturbance of this time is simply a reflection of the labor of this birthing process. Now, our guest today, after we'll work shortly with a meditation, is Dr. May East. May is a long-time co-worker and student of the Ageless Wisdom. She's a UNITAR Fellow with the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, an urban designer who's worked with cities and communities around the world. May's a consultant and educator. She has a PhD in architecture and urban planning, and this formed the basis of her recently published book, What If Woman Designed the City? The latest issue of the World Goodwill newsletter on the theme Planning for a Transformative Future includes an article by May on regeneration, a concept that has evolved over time, and that explores how regenerative approaches in the theory and practice of urban design, May's area, have changed and developed over time. And she'll be speaking to us after the meditation, so we can look forward to that. But right now, let's go to our work. That's the real central core of this webinar series, to share together as a group. We're 140 of us, 141 of us from all different parts of the world, I can see. So we can share together in using this Goodwill meditation. And remember that this is a meditation that people have been using for decades, every Wednesday, not always, but often at 12 noon local time, but any time on a Wednesday. And so as we do this meditation together, we can have in mind this much wider community that has, for over a generation, for generations really, been working with this particular energetic formula. So to begin, link up in thought with all the people around the world who are working with this Goodwill meditation group. and reflect upon the fact of relationship. How our lives and our consciousness are enmeshed in relationships with our family, with our community, with our nation, with the world of nations, all interacting, all in relationship. With the one humanity made up of all races and all nations, and with the one life. And together we can sound the mantra of unification, saying it together as one group. The souls of all are one, and I am one with them. I seek to love, not hate. I seek to serve and not exact due service. I seek to heal, not hurt. Let pain bring due reward of light and love. Let the soul control the outer form, and life and all events, and bring to light the love that underlies the happenings of the time. Let vision come, and insight. Let the future stand revealed. Let inner union demonstrate and outer cleavages be gone. Let love prevail. Let all people love. Now reflect upon your own and humanity's relationship with all beings who dwell in the higher realms of mind and heart, the spiritual hierarchy of saints, rishis, bodhisattvas, masters, honored by all the world's religions and spiritual groups. Imagine that you're standing together within the center of the spiritual hierarchy. All of us stand together as a group within the center of the spiritual hierarchy, immersed in the consciousness of the heart of love. Some recognize this heart of love as the Christ, and others use other names for the one at the center, such as Maitreya, the Imam Mahdi, and the Kalki Avatar. And now, maintaining that high point of contact, let your thoughts reach out to include all members of the human family in whom the energy of goodwill is active. All the people of goodwill, the millions of people of goodwill in every part of the world. In the center of all love, I stand. From that center, I, the soul, will outward move. From that center, I, the one who serves, will work. May the love of the divine self be shed abroad in my heart, through my group, and throughout the world. Now visualize the energy of love flowing from the hierarchy through the men and women of goodwill and into the hearts and minds of all people, infusing them with goodwill and creating loving and harmonious human relationships. And meditate on ways of spreading goodwill, creating right human relationships, and restoring peace on earth. realize that together as a group, we're helping to build a channel between the spiritual hierarchy and humanity, a channel through which the energy of goodwill flows, unifying humanity, solving its problems, and healing all cleavages. And now linked in thought with men and women of goodwill all over the world, say the great invocation, the adapted version, with deliberation and full commitment to its meaning, knowing that as we do so, we're radiating its potent energies to humanity. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into human minds. Let light descend on earth. From the center, from the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into human hearts. May the coming one return to earth. From the center, where the will of God is known, let purpose guide all little human wills, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center, which we call the human race, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. So, thank you, everybody. May, are you there? If you want to turn on your camera, and
I
there we
am.
are. Hi. So, over to you.
Thank you, Steve. We just heard that in our common task of channeling and capillarizing goodwill, developing right human relationships, and restoring peace on earth. We are told creative imagination is an important tool. If we cannot imagine the future we want to create, we will never get there. So as we stand at the threshold of another international community effort that unfolded through the Summit of the Future, as described by Steve so poetically and so deep, I'd like to invite us to expand our time horizons and use our creative imagination, journey through time, and position ourselves in 2050, when some of the main aspirations that we held today in 2024 were already actioned through the awakening of a collective will to good. So, but before we position ourselves in 2050, we need to prepare for the journey. And we make one collective decision and reaffirm three awarenesses that I believe are already alive between us. The decision is about not using an old map to reach a new territory. This means that despite the fact that our generation is facing a convergence of multiple crises, we are letting go of a problem-solving mindset and start working with the notion of potential rooted in what I call the biocultural spatial uniqueness of place. While problem-solving looks backward, potential looks forward. Potential does not exist outside a system. There's always more potential that can be realized in a system. But what do we understand by a system? As per the environmental scientist Donella Meadows, a system is a constellation, is a set of elements, sub-elements or parts. Imagine a system, a constellation of parts, interconnected in such a way that they jointly serve an overarching purpose. And systems thinking in this context is the underlying framework for seeing, naming, describing the relationship between these interconnections. So when you think about the teachings are a systems thinking because the teachings help us to understand the interrelationship between humanity, hierarchy, Shambhala forces. So it is systems, the connection between systems, understanding the relationship between these interconnections. Therefore, in the conversation that we have today, we focus our collective gaze in the potential. We focus our collective gaze in what is strong, not what is wrong. And we harness the potential as a source of collective motivation. This is the first decision, or the decision. The first awareness. So as we sit together in this early northern fall or southern spring 2024, just after the Summit of the Future, we have thousands of scenarios on the future projected by think tanks, economists, climate scientists, futurists, urbanists, big data analysts, which we can synthesize all the scenarios on the future in two. Transition is going to happen. Either we are going to design it or we're going to be victims of it. And we are aware as world workers in different stages of the path. We are all in the business of designing the transition. And we understand design as a collective process of envisioning, reflecting, conceiving, imaging how to redesign our human presence on the planet. The second awareness is related to the direction of travel. We are aware sustainability is not enough. How can we sustainably bring back something that has already been lost? Living systems have been too impacted by our lifestyles and linear economies. So here we adopt a regenerative mindset and mode of work, bringing more life, more vitality, more viability, which is vitality over time, to the systems we contribute to, and making sure our human systems can co-evolve with ecological systems over time. But you may ask, how do we bring more life? Perhaps through our rhythmic alignment with the reservoir of life. The final awareness is related to levels of work, inner, outer, and larger systems. The inner level focuses on the personal level. It is about developing myself, advancing every incarnation, the path of no return. That's the inner level focus. The outer is about developing others and projects, being in service of others and projects. And the third level concerns larger systems. This means developing the potential of people and projects to shift systems. And we are aware that we can work separately and simultaneously through these three levels of work. So, with one decision and these three awarenesses in mind, we now fast forward and position ourselves in 2050. Here we have 5 realizations. The first realization is related to mindset. The regenerative mindset adopted back in the 2020s is now in free flow. How do we know it? We know because the notion of living systems was internalized, not as an intellectual idea, but as a way of being, nurtured from child to adulthood. Also, by adopting a regenerative mindset, we started designing as nature, not for nature, and this made the world more alive, more vibrant, and resilient. The second grand realization was about metrics. Just before the end of the SDGs term, which was 2030, the UN declared that GDP was no longer going to be the measure of thrivability of nation states. Countries admitted economies could not succeed in societies and ecologies that were failing. A series of economic frameworks promoting the systemic health that were in the back burner for decades, like the well-being, the better life, the happiness index of Bhutan, genuine progress, they all took center stage. This had a ripple effect on businesses and technologies, which were used as instruments to bridge divides, ensuring no one was left behind in a circular economy. The third realization was related to human settlements. We did reach the 70% of humanity living in urban centers as projected by 2050, but urban planning shifted hands. Thus, cities start working much better for children, older people, all levels of ableness and gender identities. Living locally became a trend, active travel a norm, residents reignited the sense of place supported by local independent businesses and jobs. We re-envisioned the metabolism of cities. Urban growing provided increasingly fresh food cultivated between generations. Cities had far more tree cover. Pockets of green were connected, creating nature corridors for wilderness returning. Energy-wise, community-owned microgrids thrived, old buildings were retrofitted, new passive houses provided natural surveillance, enhancing the sense of safety, which was also reinforced by the eyes of the city, performed by the community and passers-by. In short, cities became greener, wilder, more inclusive, livable, and poetic. The fourth realization was around philosophy. By 2050, the first peoples were recognized by the UN as guardians of the memory of the creation of the world and teachers of climate resilience. Their genuine narratives started to influence global policy, and as such, they were given meaningful representation with a permanent seat at the Security Council. We adopted a dynamic and rhythmic relationship between cumulative tradition, art, music, rituals, theologies, and inner worlds. Lastly, the fifth realization was about the embodiment of a soulful political will. In 2050, policymakers, decision makers no longer were spending their day managing the entropy of failing systems by solving one problem at a time. Their focus has shifted. Their focus was on lifelines, not anymore on deadlines. Member states moved to radical collaboration, and we realize living successfully in a world of complex systems means expanding the boundaries of caring and going for the good of the whole. One decision, 3 awarenesses, 5 realizations. At this threshold of the summit of the future, this is an open invitation for each one of us to contribute with our uniqueness and energy signature to this collective endeavor of deep longing for the future. I'll leave this conversation with a quote from the poet Rainer Maria Rilke, who said, "The future must enter into you a long time before it happens." Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, May. That's just beautiful. As a comment here, May, thank you for your beautiful and inspiring presentation. Yes. Now, this is a time we have plenty of time now to have a real conversation. So please raise your hands and you can talk directly to May. You can put on your video if you wish. We would love to hear from you because all of us will be hearing as this conversation continues. And you can also enter some thoughts into the chat box. There's so much here, May. There's so much that you expressed. I loved you taking time over systems thinking. I really loved that because we use these words and they're used so widely, but we rarely see how truly deep they are. And you know, at the summit, one of the sessions that I sort of watched on a Zoom call was a session about systems thinking. So this whole idea of shifting from now to 2050, all of these things you've talked about, they're not airy-fairy. They are a part of the dynamics of the present. That's what's beautiful, I think.
Yes, I was prompted by you, Steve.
I know.
That May, can you explain better? So I start thinking about, and then I had this realization that actually the teachings are completely a systems thinking because it helps us to understand systems thinking is about a framework to understand relationship. And that's what all the books are about.
Exactly. Exactly. And like we have this environmental, to me, it's like a revelation of wholeness and interdependence. It's been a revelation in human consciousness. And essentially what that is interpenetrating ecologies. And that's what the teachings are. They are interpenetrating ecologies presented in such a way that they reach right into the little old me, and they completely have the ability to transform meaning and then will and purpose, aligning it with all of these levels of being.
I love that you use the word ecologies because that brings life with it.
Yeah.
You know? And knowing that systems, they are all these parts in relationship, what joins them is a common purpose.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's beautiful. That's also the global and the local, because through it all, there is this common the presence, and it is the presence of the divine within our neighbors, within our dog, within, you know, and for the first time ever in our history as a species, because we have this principle, as you say rightly, the indigenous represent these interpenetrating ecologies, but today that vision is coming into the consciousness in a way that the intellect is being transformed. And that's Teilhard de Chardin, will discover fire. And to me, this is what is happening. We have some, let's see what we have here in the chat box. I don't see any hands raised. What's happening? I've seen hand raised before. Let's see some hands.
But there are some interesting comments here.
Yes, exactly. Do you want to choose one that you'd like to?
Well, the first one, whole living systems thinking, is considering the whole biosocial life in which we all live, including all of the many interconnections and interrelations. Yeah. Yes. Matthew, I say, because I work with cities, so I use the biocultural spatial uniqueness of place. I put space there, so the social culture is spatial, but is resonates with what you're saying there.
That thing of place is so, that's the other revelation, I think, that interdependence is about. It is about the significance, the uniqueness of place, the uniqueness of our individuality. So it's a different, like, personality becomes something that has the potential. It's not a problem. It has the potential to be a unique expression of the whole, but unique.
Yeah.
And that, to me, freedom is essentially in that sort of uniqueness and then relating again to the whole. We don't, Heather writes that we don't have to be at the mercy of systems that only serve the few with narrowly vested interests.
Mm-hmm.
Barrett Swan has asked, thanking you and just what was needed, asking for the text of your talk. You probably don't have a text. Do you have a text, mate?
I have just bullet points, actually.
It's but the Swan, the video, the recording of this will be available, and it's also available on Facebook. So you can always go back to Facebook, because I think the recording we have is just an audio recording. But if you want to see the whole the the gig, then you can go to Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Santana, I love the idea of projecting ourselves to 2050 and how we can all play our part.
Yes, this is a difference between forecasting and backcasting. We tend to use forecasting most of the time, which is you start from here and you look at the future. But when you start from the future, from the present, you sometimes very limited by the constraints of time, and it's very difficult for you to move there without bringing the charge, the restraints that informing the world like now. So backcasting is a different way of working with your mind, which is you go from there and then you envision, you project. Of course, there is some foundation in what I projected. For instance, when I said about by 2030 GDP was not anymore the metrics for thrivability in the planet, I am aware for 3 years now there is a working group within the UN revising the concept of GDP, because they believe, some of these technical people, economists, they believe that while we're measuring wealth in the planet through the speed through which you extract, produce, consume, and dump, this generate GDP. We are never going to reach the SDGs. So there is some foundation on that, and also that realization of the first peoples becoming teachers of climate resilience. I was at the UN a few months ago and I witnessed them at the General Assembly, and Guterres is saying that, they are important teachers because they've been holding this deep relationship with the seasons, with the weather, with the river, and all that breathes. So it's about backcasting. You project in the future, you backcast. Is different than forecasting. Not sure if it makes sense, but I wanted to explain that.
Thank you for that, May. That was beautiful. Look, we have some hands raised, so that was Swan. Would you like to unmute yourself and then turn on your video if you'd like, but if you would unmute yourself, please.
Yes, thank you, Steve. So can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. So this was just a brilliant presentation because of the structure that you mentioned, like the one decision, the three, 3, 5. So 1, 3, 5, I remembered, and I was just, that's why I'm saying bullet points would be great, just so we can keep those in our minds, because of the way you explained the different ways of thinking, and it started with the moving from problem solving to the potential mindset, which I love, because, I was thinking when you do the problem solving, you're very much in the manifest material world. You're at problems that are like, you're working on symptoms. Even if you try to understand or get to the root cause, you're still working on effects, as the teachings would say, whereas when you look towards the potential, you're in the imagination, you're looking in the you're looking towards what's possible, and then you open up consciousness, so it allows you to connect to the higher worlds or bring in the soul energy. So just moving from the problem solving to the potential mindset is a huge shift. So thank you so much for that.
I love whoever said here, it's not bullet points. I'm going to erase that concept. Forever and ever. Goodbye.
Okay. No, it's thought points. It's little flower points, whatever points they are.
Okay. Brad, do you want to unmute yourself, please? Hi.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So the brilliant presentation inspired a couple of quotations from Proverbs: where there is no vision, the people perish. And from Agni Yoga, meditate on the future. both simple and profound, of course, hopefully leading to action. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Jen.
Hey, Steve.
Hey.
Hey, May. This conversation is just electric to me. I can't thank you enough. The way, and this has all been said already, and I'm just going to say it in different words, but the way you were able to reverse engineer the future from the present, I think this should be applied to so many of the issues over at the United Nations. It is a process of creativity. We do have to envision the future. Why do we have to envision it in a linear way? Why can't we just go to the end and walk backwards and see what we did and then do it? This concept is brilliant, and can't thank you enough for bringing it to our attention. Thanks.
One of the thoughts from that for me is that you say, Jim, why don't we do it? That when you look backwards, you see we are actually doing it. That to me is the huge transformation of recognition. So instead of we will become, we are becoming, or in a Virgo sense, this is being born, and it's being born in us and through all our fellow human beings. Joseph.
Hello?
Hey, gotcha.
Yeah, hi there. Hi both. Hi everyone. Thank you for this. Great to hear some of the stuff, and I guess my mind's kind of bouncing over a few different things. Some of it is the French Sufi philosopher, in his relation, and some of his kind of discussion on his approach to time. Time in its own right is linear, and I think that's kind of something where it's kind of backcasting. But also for me, the idea of casting full stop, because I think one of the issues that we've had for quite some time, we've lost a lot of our stories and our mythic kind of ways, our mythologies that could be urban, could be tied to the land. We've moved so far away from that actually that is recasting, backcasting, rebirthing itself into our lives. And I think we're starting to see that, and I think that's really important. But I think in that there's a certain element that we become indigenous to the stories, indigenous to the places. That's local, national, indigenous to ourselves and who we're becoming, or we have become, and we're back becoming. So I just think, there's some really kind of interesting points that you both said. So thanks for that.
I love the concept, Joseph, of becoming indigenous to our places. Beautiful. I think that was one of the legacies of COVID, in a way, because it has really created the conditions for us to deepen the sense of place.
Sam, do you want to unmute yourself? And just while you're doing that, Heidi has a little comment on the chat box. May we affirm that this is universal thinking? I really like that. In other words, there's a whole community of mind and heart that is actually now thinking intelligently, skillfully, and involved in all sorts of professionally in all sorts of transformative issues. That is thinking in this manner. It's beautiful. Sam, Katie Doody. Sam, do you want to unmute yourself?
Unmute. There we go. I'm talking to myself. As Joseph just said about sort of our our vision also as an esoteric group. I just found today that they've opened the Warburg Museum as part of, I think it's a London university, about the occult, which is sort of very, very big for us, knowing that that's now open for people to go and see the art and the amazing building they've created. So I will put the link up if people wish.
Please.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy.
Oh, sorry. I took time to unmute. Thanks so much, both of you. So inspiring. I know that's how everyone feels. I wasn't feeling very well before this, and I was going to give it a miss. And I just feel so much better. I'm so glad I came on here. And what I feel that you're saying, this is like, it's always very difficult to define the intuition, but this to me is a brilliant definition of the intuition, as in moving from when really using the imagination and moving into an intuitive form of living. And behind it, I sense the old Zen connecting with this new system of thinking or living or whatever it is, this new framework. And it just goes beyond all the cliches. You know, as participants in this group, I feel we all want what we know is possible, but so fed up with all the cliches. And where I'm thinking, where does this put politics? You know, I feel it might bring it forward, because there's not a lot we can do with the political thinking at the moment. And this perhaps is one way of pulling it forward, because to me it's very stuck. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks, Wendy. Maria Christina, unmute. Thank you. And then we'll make you you can be the last voice, Maria, because we're coming to the end of our time.
Well, besides the incredible thank yous and vision, because without vision, the people perish. I've been envisioning, just updating the language with like the Christ being the CEO rather than the heart of hierarchy, or I find such little shiftings in language helps acceptability in the wider community. That's all. I like that thought of the Christ as the CEO of systems designs. Of that particular, and looking at it in that way kind of gives it a I don't know, updated feeling. Not much to say. Thank you. It was beautiful though. Thank you, May East and all.
Thank you, Maria Christina. This idea, if we think of this thinking of stewardship, and so the Christ is present. The reappearance is through stages, and the stages are happening. It's not something in the future. So the birth of the Christ in the human heart is something that's happening, and we see that. One of the evidences of that is this thing of the sense of leadership as steward, concern for all of life, and how the evidence of the Christ's presence in the human heart is through this growing sense of responsibility that's so much wider than about the ego and the separate self. So May, thank you so much. Thank you for all you do, for all you contribute, and thank you so much for your presence on our little conversation today. Very grateful. Thank you, everybody. Can we just have a moment just to say that the chat box is very interesting. You can download the chat box. There's a way of doing it which somebody else can advise more better than me, I think. If for those of you who would like to keep it and look back through it, because it's such interesting thoughts. And a way, if you look at the those who've contributed by raising their hands and who've contributed by the chat box, that to me shows us something of the beauty of our little group, of this group. There's a depth of thinking, of universal, truly universal thinking in this group that is, it's really so lovely to see. And you can imagine the Tibetan looking at this and feeling, you know, pushing to go deeper and more synthetic and more intuitive, but still with a measure of gratitude. So friends, let's have a moment of just complete silence, and then we'll end this call. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, May.
Thank you.